New circuit boards for Mike, and we need to put together. And we're going to set up some low profile ones. If I can find header pins. There's Mike. This is the low profile mount, so you can see how it's much tighter than the other one. And header pins no longer exist. I don't know if you knew this. So, I actually need header pins. Oh boy. So, header pins are required because we're going to be putting this Pro Micro, or a light setup here, this Pro Micro into our Mike, which you might have guessed that's how Mike got its name. And there's our low profile circuit board, our low profile plate mount, and our low profile body. So let's liberate a few switches first from a previous project. Soldering iron is heated up. Needs to be tinted a little bit. There is one caveat to all of this. The caveat, there we go, that's a good one. The caveat is that it is freezing. I'm in Kentucky, and we are very, very cold right now. And I am in an unheated garage, making me even more cold, even something. Hang on a sec. There we go. So, this is the race against time. You see, we're trying to figure out if we can do this in the time it takes me to be horribly annoyed and frozen. So, let's see what happens. Value. There we go. So the low profile Mike is very nice. I like I like pretty much everything about it. It's very nice. And I would highly recommend putting one together for yourself. So let's see here. Wipe this off. We're going to need 6 of these. Cannibalizing previous projects, which is how we do. That's just life. There we go. And these are the Kailh low profile. There we go. Hopefully I don't mess up any of these. Solder helper. If you've never had one of these, I highly recommend it. There we go. Yeah, very nice. We're going to create a lovely new Mike, and we're going to not screw up. Because since it has a plate now, there's actually an order that must be observed. or you will you'll lock yourself out. Just undesirable. What is that? This switch doesn't look right. Come on now. That switch doesn't look right. I might grab another one. Oh, I've got a backup. All right, cool. All right. Just clean these up a little bit. Hold still. And when it won't hold still, we've got 3D printed vise. Yes. Highly recommend one of these. I turned out like 3 of these, and I want like 3 more because they're really that useful. They're actually very useful 3D printed vices. And they make holding things steady much easier. There we go. We also have to make sure that our leads, the leads that come off of the switch, are cleaned up. This one has a little extra solder on it, and I'm just going to try to scrape that up and off because the access ports on this are intentionally small. So this is going to have to run through one of those ports, or one of those vias, through holes. Let's take a look at these. Get cleaned up a little bit. There we go. I'm also kind of assuming that these switches work. I don't know why they wouldn't, but if they don't, I'm going to have a bad time. There we go. Because like I said, you will lock yourself out of this because the assembly process requires it almost. If you assemble it, you can only assemble it in one order, and then if something is wrong and you have to undo it, is very difficult to undo. So just do it right, lol. First try. And that's why we're doing this. This is me working on this, but also doubling as an instructional video. And I'm going to be a professional engineer and actually grab the tester so that I can test those switches. Oh boy, it's a lot warmer hanging out by the soldering iron. So let's set continuity, signal. There we go. Good. 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 Interesting. Oh, that's got a nasty solder joint on it. Nasty solder blow on it. Maybe a little bit of oxidation. Bad contact. Here. There we go. All right. We are continuous. I'll just put this in the pile of things. That's where things go, in the pile. And now let's take a look here. So the first step is going to be, well, the first step is actually to test your Pro Micro, to test whatever connector you're using, whatever device you're using, program it, make sure it's successful, make sure it reads on your computer, make sure it shows up, make sure it programs, all of that. Test all of that first. And if you can, even test out shorting one of the pins that's wired to the buttons to ground and make sure that it actually reacts appropriately. So you want to test this before you install it, because once you install it, it's very difficult to uninstall, to remove. But first step we're going to do is identify our print mic. That's going to be on the top right hand corner. So that's facing you, and we're going to take these header pins that are sized to fit that Pro Micro and put them on the bottom. Now, one other thing to note is there are two sets of header pins here. There's actually a version of the Pro Micro which has a mini connector. I highly recommend it. I think the mini connector is better in pretty much every way than the micro connector. But the micro goes on the inner sets of holes, and the mini connector goes on the outer sets. So if you're wiring a micro, make sure you use the inside row, and if you're wiring a mini, make sure you use the outside rows. Okay? So we've got mic, the text right here. The text right here, we got that facing us upward, and we're going to choose the header pins. We're going to install them on the bottom, and we're going to install them on the inside row here because we're using a Pro Micro. So again, this is the top, flip it over, and there are our pins. That's where they need to be. Now there is a bit of a trick to putting these together so that they're aligned, because you can solder them like this, and then you're just gonna have a terrible time. You should solder them correctly. Surprise. So let's turn this upside down a little bit, and we're only gonna solder one pin on it. Hang on a sec here. There we go. We're going to solder one pin on it. We've got the top, that in, and I'm going to set it down so that it's still through. It's not aligned, it's at kind of a funny angle, but it doesn't matter because we're just going to do one pin. There we go. I don't mean to alarm you, but my desk is a mess. There we go. One pin. You can see one pin soldered and at a funny angle, so no problem. What we're going to do is take the pin that is soldered and go to the other side. So this is the pin that is soldered. I'm not going to touch that one. I'm going to put my thumb down here, and I'm going to apply a little bit of a pressure to stand it up. And then I'm going to melt the solder, then use my thumb to put it pretty straight, and then let the solder harden. So now we've straightened out the pin here. Still just one pin. We're going to do the next, same for the other side. Again, we're using the inside row of pins because we're using a Pro Micro. Same thing, we're just going to solder one pin, and this doesn't really want to cooperate. So let's see if we can. We're actually just going to use the vise. All right. Just one pin. There we go. Just one pin. This second one looks pretty straight, actually. So let's go ahead and grab our Pro Micro. And the Pro Micro from the top, the connector always faces up. So this is where it says mic. The pins are on the bottom. We're going to place this connecting up with the connector facing up on those pins. And if those don't line up quite right, then you can always loosen the solder, melt the solder on one side, and it'll correct itself once you have this once you're using this as a spacer properly. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to take this. Actually, the first thing we're going to do is, now that we know that this is aligned properly, we're going to go ahead and solder the rest of the pins on it. There we go. There we are. We're going to go ahead and just solder the rest of these header pins. Come on now. There we go. My feet are starting to feel the cold. This is a fume extractor. You have one. God installed one in your face. Sends the fumes far away from you. You just have to breathe. Breathe normally. A little bridge there. Just lifting it out. There we go. Alright, let's take a look at our handiwork here. A couple of these look a little weird. But looks pretty good. All right, and we're going to take the Pro Micro, which we've already tested and already programmed. Okay, Pro Micro, we have tested it first before we solder it. Okay, test. And we're going to put it on the back end like this. And it is important to have the connector here. So I've attached the connector to it, and I'm handling it with the connector, but I'm also going to add a little bit of a spacer just to give it a little bit of clearance, just so I have a little bit of room with the connector that I want to use. So I don't want the connector to be pressed all the way against the top of the circuit board, because then it might be hard to insert. I just want to give it a little bit of space, okay? So I'm just going to use a little spacer for that, just a little piece of plastic I have around. Give it a little bit of clearance. And now you can see that we're at an angle here, so I'm going to want to straighten that out as best we can. And I might just go ahead and solder one pin like this. That should be the right space. Get one pin on. Just one. It's easy to undo one. And now we can take a look. We've got a little bit of clearance right here. It's still at a bit of an angle, so I'm going to lift up this back side while I melt the solder. too high? Or is that just right? Let's see. That's pretty good. Could stand to be a little higher. Now it's angling kind of the wrong way. Let's try this again. Take your time with this. This is not something you're going to get to undo later on. This is us being very careful, moving slowly, and only soldering one joint at a time. So that looks a bit better. Still kind of at an angle, but I think I'm okay with it. Push this down slightly. I also can just like push down on it. It's only soldered by one pin, so if I get a little bit of an angle on it, I can just push it down. Or if it's lifting up too high, I can just move the back end down a little bit. I think that's what I'm going to do. So again, just one solder joint, one point soldered. So I'll push that down a little. That looks about right. Pretty even, maybe a little higher. That looks good. And now we'll solder a second joint, same side. There we go. Now let's take a look. We've got our connector, we've got a little bit of space underneath, a little bit of clearance. Everything looks pretty even. Very good. Yep, I like it. Okay, now we're going to solder the rest. Just going to disconnect the cable. We'll get the rest of our soldering joints on. These are always at a funny angle for me. I'm going to double check it just one more time, just because I hate desoldering these. It's such a pain. Yeah, that looks very nice. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. See? I told you. I did it wrong. I just did it wrong. I just ruined it. Well, we'll see if we can save it. I did this out of order. That's the problem. So let's not solder this in place. We're going to desolder it real quick. Oops. Come on. This is why we do it live. Because this teaches us. This is how we learn. We learn from our mistakes. At least regular people do. Not engineers. Come on. There we go. We are now desoldering because I already made a mistake. This is we're doing it live, all right? Doing it live. Come on now. That looks pretty good. So the connection point actually requires that the switches be attached first, because we've just covered the switch ports right after we got it just right. There we go. Because if I take this switch and put it on this way, how am I supposed to get under there and solder it? Science. Think. Come on. Let's see. This is the fun part. fun part of any project. Messing up and having to fix things. These look pretty clear. Let's take a look. There we go. Getting my practice in, my desoldering practice in. I need to add to this one. There we go. When it actually falls free, then you know you've made it to the bottom. Alright, hopefully I didn't destroy that Pro Micro in the process. Clean this up a little bit. Very good. Now what you're actually supposed to do is once you get the headers mounted on the bottom, now you add the switches. Actually, let's flatten these out first. We have very little clearance for these, so we're actually going to level these out, just remove whatever we've got here. And be sure you wear iPro because this stuff goes flying everywhere. We're just going to level this out because the low profile switches are very, very low, and there's very little clearance underneath them. I don't know if you can hear the little tinkling sound of these things flying everywhere. There we go. Much flatter, right along the top there. Alright, let's get our switches that go in this position. Through. Looking good. Hold that down. And as usual, solder one leg. Now we've got it at a funny angle. Now I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure and melt the solder. It sits in place. Now we've got it in the right position. I'm going to do the same for the next one. I've messed up again. This I should really make a step-by-step procedure for this. All of these switches need to be mounted through the plate the first time, because the plate goes in between here. There we go. Now I'm just going to pull gently on it while I melt the last bit of the solder, and out we go. Clean up that hole a little bit. Perfect. Plate. Plate goes on the top. And the plate also, we've got, again, the Mike print right here. This is the front of it. This is the top of it. This is the front of it facing away from us. The plate fits right here. And it has that cutaway room for the Pro Micro, for the microcontroller to connect. So we're going to go ahead and insert the plates, or insert the switches into the plate. Well, that's almost loose. That's weird. That one's tighter, much better. There we go. Nice hearty snap into place. Another one. And actually, I mean, technically you only have to do diagonals to get it set. But we also want to get these two especially. So go right here. Now we'll line this up. Get our connections through the circuit boards. There we go. Yeah, I think we're going to have to... I think the right way to do it is to put all the switches through. That'll guarantee... I'll make sure we have good alignment on all of them at the same time. Very good. Okay, get our alignment through here. There we go. Make sure these are nice and flat by pressing them through to the circuit board. And might have to pull up on the plate on a couple of these just to make sure we're lined up. This one's not lined up. Bent the pin down. There we go, let's try that again. Much better. All right, there we are. So now we will proceed. We'll go ahead with the low profile plate mount PCB. I told you the order of operations was important, and then promptly forgot. There we go. And we'll go ahead and do one leg on each switch. we go. Check our alignment by squeezing the switch onto the PCB while melting that solder joint. Good. Next one. That one moved in a little bit, which is good. There we go. These are snapping into place. Good. Good. I'm just pinching the key button against the circuit board while I melt this. There we go. Let's take a look at our solder joints so far. Not bad. Except for that one. That one's bad. And now we'll hit the rest of them. A little hard to get at between the header pins here, but we could do it. Go figure, my live stream of instructions for how to do the thing is more of a cautionary tale than than instructions. That one could use a little more. All right. We've got our low profile switches mounted to the plate through to the PCB with the header pins previously installed before the switches were installed. Now, and only now, is when we install the micro, the Pro Micro. Once again, this is a Pro Micro we have tested already. It is one we have already programmed. Going to line ourselves up here. Give ourselves a little bit of room for the top of the controller. Everything aligned very nicely. Make sure it's on straight. There we go. I'm going to solder one pin on each side. Take out our connector and inspect our handiwork. This looks pretty good. So there's actually a this switch pin is sticking up kind of close. I would, especially it's close to the connector like that, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the end of that switch pin. So we've got this switch pin underneath that's very close to this connector that we plug into. So I'm just going to nip it off. And the other one, just because it's there. There we go. More room, it's flatter. This right here. More clearance there. Maybe I could get a little lower. That's probably about it. I suppose you could also like put some electrical tape over there, I guess. I don't know. I haven't had a problem with it. Alright. I'm good with alignment on this, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the pins. That's another thing. We've got a good view of the clearance between the MCU and the PCB, so we can see that nothing's contacting. It's not resting directly on there, so that's plenty of room. I'm going to go ahead and solder the rest of the leads. All right. See how that looks? Missed one. Looks good. All right. Now we'll go ahead and cut off the excess of the leads here. Again, wearing eye protection. There we go. Nice and flat over there. Looking pretty good. Good clearance. Now we're going to go ahead and mount it into the case. So the case has a couple of rails. The first rail, the bottommost rail right here, that rail is for the PCB. And then there's another kind of a lip, a captive lip. And the plate goes underneath this lip. PCB goes in this rail, the plate goes underneath this lip. Let's get ourselves set up here. Looking good. Kind of see the alignment there. And that's just about it. And the upper plate fits through onto the lower plate of the body. There we go. Man, looks slick. It's really light too. Don't know why. I feel like it shouldn't feel this light. It's so nice. There we go. Super thin mic macro builder. And let's go see how it works. So that's how you build it, or rather that's a lot of instruction about how you don't build it, but you know, we're learning. This is instructive. This is how instructions work. All right.